Now, here is Neanderthal, quite a different creature. Massively constructed, even more massive than Homo erectus to a degree, and also very different from anatomically modern hominids, modern humans. The robusticity of the Neanderthal has had many explanations. A lot of people have considered it to be a polar adapted or cold adapted hominid, as you read in the paper by Trenton Holliday, I think. And there are various characteristics. There's another paper, I think, by Ian Tattersall, where he discusses the function of these different characteristics of the skull. I don't want to go too far into that. I just want you to see sort of have a three-dimensional look at these different hominids. So you remember I mentioned that we've got Homo erectus comes out of Africa, and then coming from Africa, it spreads into different parts of sub-Himalayan Eurasia, that is Asia, and then what we would call Europe. One of those offshoots, one of the populations that sort of descended from that initial expansion of Homo erectus is Neanderthal. And Neanderthal, of course, is this occupant of the Near East, which we're not looking at in this class very much, but also what we would call Europe. And beginning around 130 to 300,000 years ago, depending on which anatomist you ask, somewhere around that time you begin to see a very distinctive European variety of late Homo erectus, and that's what we call Neanderthal. That's this one. Massively constructed, quite a large brain. In fact, some Neanderthal brains are a little bit larger than modern human brains, and with a number of characteristics that Ian Tattersall went over in your paper. You can see the teeth are somewhere in the middle. They're a little bit larger than modern humans, but they are a little bit smaller than Homo erectus on average. You can see they have a very large nasal cavity. People have tried to explain this again and again. Some people say it's a characteristic of a cold adaptation, pre-warming the air before it hits the lungs in ice age conditions. There are problems with that analysis, as Ian Tattersall mentioned in his paper. You can see that it has some characteristics very much in common with Homo erectus, from which it is descended. It does have a little bit sort of the wider base and pointed top, and you can see here what's called post-orbital constriction. Beyond or behind the orbits, where the eyes sit, the cranium sort of pinches in. You can clearly see that with Homo erectus, whereas it's quite absent in modern humans. Also lacking sort of a forehead, a typical forehead of modern humans. Again, the frontal lobe in modern humans has expanded in the last 150 to 200,000 years, whereas it didn't so much expand in the Neanderthal. We would love to be able to say that we could reconstruct, well, what was going on in the mind of the Neanderthal versus modern humans based on the development of certain areas of the brain. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. We used to have these maps of, you know, here are certain lobes of the brain. Here are things that go on in the brain, and to a degree, those are a good rough guide. The problem with that is that we know that other parts of the brain can take over when certain areas might be damaged, for example. And so saying that the frontal lobe is associated with such and such behaviors in modern humans, and because it's missing in Neanderthal they would have lacked those behaviors, that's not necessarily the case. Perhaps those behaviors were present, but they were being controlled from other regions of the brain. Again, it would have been nice if it were this simple story where each region of the brain carries a new potential and new easily sort of mapped cognitive abilities, but we don't see that. In fact, it's much more complex. So here is Homo erectus, from which we are all descended, from which erectus is Neanderthal is descended, and modern humans. So erectus evolves in Africa, leaves Africa. One of the descendants of erectus is Neanderthal, a sort of West Eurasian, Near Eastern and European descendant of erectus, a sort of cold adapted, perhaps, erectus in Europe. And then along come, and we haven't got here yet, but we will, along come the modern humans, something on the order of 35 to 45,000 years ago, arriving in what we call Europe, which is already populated by Neanderthal. But within about 8 to 10,000, well, depending on the chronology, something on the order of 6 to 8,000 years, on the order of 6 or 8,000 years, Neanderthal is extinct. We see no more Neanderthal fossils. All we see are fossils of modern humans. This wave of modern humans is another wave, another colonization wave that comes out of Africa. Africa is sort of the heart of humanity. It's like a heart that pumps blood out. And it is modern humans also that come out of Africa in a sort of second wave after the initial wave of Homo erectus goes out and colonizes sub-Himalayan Asia and Europe. They go there, they settle. One of them is Neanderthals. They're living there, and then around 100,000 years ago, another wave of newly evolved hominids comes out of Africa. This one is modern humans, and they come out and apparently replace all of the previous existing populations that were the remnants of that first wave of colonization by Homo erectus. So here we have this case where over a few thousand years we have Neanderthals having survived in Europe for 150, 200,000 years, having survived just fine, existing there in Europe, and then along comes a newcomer, this lightly built hominid that survives by brain capacity and cultural complexity rather than by brute force, essentially. Although this is not a hominid that survives entirely by brute force, again, its brain, the Neanderthal brain, is very large compared to even ours and to other hominids. So they're not dumb. They're certainly very smart and capable animals, but something, or hominids, which are animals, of course, but something is very different in the mind and the behavior of AMHSS, anatomically modern Homo sapiens sapiens, very different from what we see in Neanderthals. That is going to be one of the things that we'll examine towards the end of the class. For the moment, just keep in mind some of these gross anatomical differences. I think they're quite easy to see between these hominids. That's really what I wanted you to see today, and I'm going to take a few minutes and review this video and then say a few more things. All right? Good. See you next time.